Okay, let me continue on, Connie. 1977, after working at the Hamburger House food maker restaurant in El Cajon, I worked there 6 months. So anyway, Hamula was a great manager. She gave me a chance, at least, even though I broke garbage disposal 2 times, 2 or 3 times. She gave me a chance. I only called in sick once, but I was a dishwasher. I was making minimum wage, okay, in 1977. So I was making like 2.65 an hour, but it was Monday through Friday, and I had weekends off. And so, I had my cleaning duties. I would clean, vacuum the restaurant, do the bathrooms, and then, I had side work to do and clean the refrigerators, and then I had all the, dishes to do and all that. So I got the nick and hang of it, of course. Well, one morning around May, here comes this blonde-haired woman. She kind of looked like Dolly Parton, and her name was Carol Steppahagen. And she had big smiles, and I looked at her blonde hair, and she had like big breasts. Wow, she was attractive, but I will tell you this. Boy, she was a tough cookie. Well, first thing she said is Pamela here. I said, no, she doesn't come in until 8. She said, oh, okay, I'm going to be the new manager, and I'm going to make changes. And of course, me being 18 years old in 1977, I'm being naive, and I was stupid enough to ask her, well, I hope you don't change my schedule because I like working my days, and I don't have any other way to get here. I was so stupid of me to say that. So anyway, Pamela was training Carol Steppahagen. We were very all upset. Very, very upset that day. But anyway, the next day, Carol took over and she fired the cook. Just like that. She fired him. Yeah. He'd been the cook. Dale had been there for a long time. Then she fired a busboy. Then she fired waitresses. And every week she fired somebody. And then she had us. We had to go to a staff meeting. And she made up the most ridiculous rules. You see, my dad was president of the union. My dad worked as a janitor. He was at Miramar Naval Air Base Station, and he was a janitor there. But he also made money being the president of the union. So I grew up as a kid. I used to go with my dad. My dad was a union shop steward. My dad was an organizer. My dad was on a negotiations team. And I used to go on weekends to Sacramento with my dad when he ever went to union conventions. And he was with a very strong union at Miramar. Well, he moved himself all the way to treasurer and secretary, and he became a vice president. So he made good money. And plus, he had been in the Navy for 20 years. My dad had been in the Navy for 20 years. So he had that, plus he was working his full-time job, plus he was the president of the union. So I grew up, Connie, going into the union with my dad and watching my dad with the union negotiations. So, the union, I was raised and brought up in unionism, you see. So, anyway, my dad knew what the labor laws were, and I had learned about labor laws in that factor. So this new boss, Carol, she had this staff meeting, and she'd say, I don't want you talking about politics or religion or anything else, or else. And you better not eat on your day off, or else. And everything was, don't do this or don't do that, or else. And she cut my hours. I was making 80 hours, 90 hours. Then she cut it down to 27 hours, so I was only working 2 or 3 days a week. And she had me on a weird schedule. I would close restaurant till at 6 till 12, turn around and have to come in the morning shift, and I'd be off the next day, and she'd have me come in the morning, and then turn around, be off the next day, and then work nights. It was horrible, and she wound up firing me, of course. That was my first job. So I was very devastated when she let me go. Um, it was Father's Day, I remember, in June of 1977. And I remember that it was busy, but the temperature of the dishwashing machine went over 180 degrees in normal, so dishes were cracking. And my boss, Carol, said, John, what am I going to do with you? Well, I didn't want to say anything as an 18-year-old, of course. I just And then she called my house, and my dad picked up the phone and listened to the conversation. And Carol said, "Oh, John, you don't have to come to work on Tuesday. I've changed your schedule. Come in Thursday." I had no clue Carol had set me up to get me to have me fired. So Thursday was payday. I went and took my folks out for dinner. I thought, okay, before I go to work and before I pick up my check, I'm going to take my folks out for dinner. So I took my folks out for dinner. Well, the assistant manager, Glenda Davis, who was a pretty young woman as well, she came out while I was sitting with my parents. And she said, "Oh, you're not supposed to be here." I said, "What are you talking about?" "Well, you're not supposed to be eating here on your day off." Well, my dad spoke up because my dad was, president of the union. He knew the labor laws, and he spoke up. And he told me not to sign anything or any papers or whatever. Anyway, I went back there to get my check. And Glenda Davis, I said, "Well, where's Carol?" "Oh, she's off today. She had to have her hair done." And she said, "I have to tell you something. I hate to do this, but I'm only doing what Carol told me to do. You've been terminated, you've been fired." And so I read the termination slip. I was so devastated. It was the first job I ever had, and I was fired. Well, Sharon Hill and Paul and Rick and everybody and coworkers were just like very upset that they let me go. Even my cash register, Debbie Hood. Debbie Hood and I became really good friends. She was a very beautiful girl. Long hair, dark hair. She was kind of Latino, white, but she lived in Lakeside, and she was one of those wild girls that loved to have a good time, and she liked to party, and she liked to drink, and she was just a down-to-earth girl. And her and I became good friends when we talked on the job. She would tell me lots of things about what's going on with her boyfriend and all that, and she and I had a lot in common. She was a very attractive woman. I wanted to ask her out, but she had a boyfriend, and she would tell me about some of her problems that she was having with her boyfriend. And of course, she was interested in my life. And of course, at that time, I would tell her some of the wild stories that were going on in my life in 1977. Because I was a criminal as far as a victim of crime, of criminals hitting my head or robbing me or doing all kinds of things. So I would tell her, and she would really wonder. Well, anyway, they were all shocked that I was let go. I came back the next day and told Carol, "Why did you let me go?" And the employee that said the employee has tried very hard, but is having too many accidents, breaking dishes, is not qualified for a job. Carol Stephagen, June 16th, 1977, was the day I got terminated, when I got fired. And she smiled at me and said, "Oh, well, I'll give you a high recommendation, and then hire you back." Well, I was vulnerable enough to want to come back because I enjoyed my job. Well, anyway, I went ahead and applied for the International House of Pancakes. Well, a Filipino manager he hired me. I had the interview, he hired me. He did talk to Carol. Carol said she gave me a high recommendation because I went back to the restaurant to visit, and Carol said she gave me a high recommendation because she had a big smirky smile, two-faced smile, and I knew she was up to no good. And so anyway, I got hired at International House of Pancakes. I worked there for about 4 months. 1977, all the way till October, July up to October. I was working nights, closing. I was working full time, sometimes overtime, of course. So it was kind of nice. My sister would pick me up and take me home, of course. But except for the nights, like Friday nights, Saturdays, I would say, "Look, I'm not coming home." So I'd stay out all night in El Cajon. Back in those days, those were the days. And El Cajon was all kinds of cruising spots and people hanging out. And there was the adult bookstore, and there was the old J.C. Penney's and everything else in El Cajon at the time, back in 1977. So I worked at the International House of Pancakes, and it was okay. I mean, I was making minimum wage. I slept in till 10 o'clock in the morning, 10:30, and then of course I had my lunch at home, And then, there wasn't much I could really do because I had to be ready to get ready to go to work. And so my mom would take me to work, or my sister would take me to work because she was working at the Al Cajon pet store. So I would get a ride there. So about the only time I had time for myself, well, it was after work, of course. You know. So I worked there until 1977 of October. Then all of a sudden I come in the shift, and all of a sudden I see my time card on the desk. And I thought, uh-oh, that's not good. I had a feeling I was getting fired. So I came back the next day, and the International House of Pancakes, the guy fired me. I asked him why, and he had said, well, he had talked to the manager. I used to work with Carol, and he now realizes why she fired me. And I said, well, what did she say? And he said, well, she said you asked her too many questions because she's a woman. You're having too many accidents breaking dishes. And I knew something was going down because all of a sudden my boss at the International House of Pancakes started bossing me around, cussing and yelling at me, accusing me of things. And I thought something was really going really crazy. So anyway, I got fired there, and then um, I worked at Vaqueros family restaurant down the street, the very same street. I only worked there for a month because they didn't have enough hours. And I sent this lady named Anne. She said, "Hi, John." I said, "Who do I know you?" "Oh, yes, I'm Carol's sister." And oh my God, here I'm being followed. Um, I did get my unemployment when Carol fired me. I was on unemployment, but not for long because I went ahead and got hired by the International House of Pancakes. But when the International House of Pancakes fired me, I went on unemployment. So I worked at that restaurant, Amy's, for just a month as a busboy. Then in January of 1978, I got hired at the Santee Grill, Family Grill restaurant in Santee, and I worked the graveyard shift, which was fine because I was pretty a typical night owl person anyway. I was always a typical night owl person. I would go out and do my thing, and I wouldn't come home to my folks till like 2 or 3 in the morning, sometimes 4 in the morning, you know. So working at the Santee Grill was kind of handy. My mother would pick me up and give me a ride home. Sometimes I would call her and tell her I'm not going home because I would hang out with the guys. One of the guys named Dale and some of the other cooks that I knew. I would hang out with them. So